Welcome to Burnout and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Victor Bartley, and in this space, we explore burnout intervention measures in the lives of people. Burnout syndrome is not anything new, but has been an existing pandemic within mainstream culture. Leaders in various industries have faced this in silence, but we want to encourage every listener that you are not alone, and burnout is an invitation to begin again. Today's episode is part one of a conversation with international best-selling author Jacquie Abram. Jacquie has been recognized by Forbes for her courage in the area of workplace racism. Her book series, Hush Money, is based on the true events in the life of one Black woman who exposed workplace racism and kept her job. Join the conversation as we grow beyond the burnout with Jacquie Abram. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Burnout and Beyond. I am Victor Bartley, your host, and today I am thrilled to share the space with Jacquie Abrams. Jacquie, welcome to the space.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's even more pleasure that is ours to share this time with you. For those that don't know who you are, would you give us a brief commercial of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, again, my name is Jacquie Abram. I am the author of an international best-selling and award-winning book called Hush Money: How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism in Her Workplace and Kept Her Job. I'm really excited about this book. I was recently featured in Forbes talking about the book and my experiences with racism in the workplace. So, it's something that is near and dear to me, that I'm passionate about. And I'm just really thrilled to be here today to share a little bit about that journey with you.
Awesome. Yes, and I got a chance to read the books and was absolutely fascinated and hooked. I was sharing with my wife as I was hooked to my phone. I do a lot of ebooks these days.
Yes.
And I was saying that most of the books that I read nowadays are nonfiction, historical forms of books, but fiction isn't something I've done in a while.
Right.
And so it was a nostalgic in a sense, but also just a very enthralling piece of series rather of books that I deeply enjoyed. So thank you so much for writing, putting the pen to paper, and sharing this with the world. The world.
Victor, you brought up something, that is really important and that's actually very common. A lot of the readers, so my book is an international bestseller. It's being read all across the world. But many of the people who are reading my book, they actually prefer to read nonfiction. But what they are saying about Hush Money is that because it is fiction inspired by true events, and as you read the story, you can tell without a doubt that there is a real woman behind this story, and you can see its raw authenticity, that it relates to you and something that you would typically read as a nonfiction reader.
No, absolutely. No, I think you definitely nailed it. Just the raw reality of even what is penned as fiction.
Yes.
You share this story. I've gotten a chance to listen to some of the interviews that you've done before, and you talk about this being a sort of healing process through the racism that you experienced, the systematic racism that you experienced on the job. How has this book series on Ebony impacted the healing journey for you and your daughters?
So, in order for me to answer that question, I think your audience needs a little bit of context from me in terms of what happened that required healing. So let me just answer that question by first giving a little bit of background. So, as you know, Victor, I'm not a writer. My background is not in writing. Writing is something that I never wanted to do. I never planned to do. It wasn't in my career path, and it wasn't something I dreamed about. I actually had a lucrative career in higher education. I was a leader in finance. And when I say that I was good at my job, I have to put emphasis on that, Victor. I was exceptional at my job, okay? And
I
because
love
I
it.
was exceptional at my job, it actually paid me a lucrative salary. I was making six figures, okay? And not only did this job, give me enough to provide for my two children, which,
Mhm.
as a single mother of two girls was essential because, my income was the only income in my family, but it also gave me the opportunity to pay my bills comfortably, okay? Um, by any measure, Victor, by any measure, it
Mhm.
really should have been a successful career, but it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is because as I was building my career in higher education and even though I was earning an excellent salary, I was working in environments that were absolutely horrific, horrific to say the least. Okay. And so I found myself suffering a lot of racial trauma. And, people really don't like to talk about racial trauma, but I was being affected because of the environment that I was in, the toxic environment day in and day out. I was being affected on an emotional, a psychological, and a physical aspect. And, I found myself in very dangerous very dangerous territory where I was considering both homicide because, Victor,
Hmm.
I wanted to kill my boss. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that to try to be funny, okay? I
Sure.
was so messed up. I was so messed up behind what these people were doing to me as they were stripping away my career and my ability to provide for my children, that I found myself considering the various ways that I could kill my boss. And that's a very dangerous place to be because
Hmm.
then you start to realize and understand how people can just lose it and go postal. They start going on these killing sprees and killing their bosses and their coworkers. And I am an intelligent, ambitious uh, Black woman,
Mhm.
but I found myself just suffering trauma that was unimaginable. And when I wasn't considering homicide, I was considering suicide. And
Mhm.
let me just tell you why that is.
Yeah.
I told you that my career in higher education um, was a job that I just loved, that I was exceptional at, but it spanned 20 years, so
Okay.
nearly 20 years, okay? And I kept getting just so far up that ladder, and then someone in the organization would target me, okay, because I can't hide that I'm Black. And before I knew what was happening, that ladder that I was on and me came
Mhm.
crashing down when the rug was pulled from under me. So if it only happened to me one time, I think I could have handled that.
Mhm.
But after losing everything and then starting all over, getting so far up that ladder again, and then having someone in the organization who is in a position of power and influence, they are a leader in
Mhm.
that organization, who not only has biases against you because you're Black, but they have the power and the influence to put actions behind those biases.
Wow.
And they pull the rug from under you again, and you come crashing down and you lose everything, okay? So by the fourth, by the fourth and fifth time
Wow.
of losing everything, because someone in the organization who was in a position of power and influence determined that I didn't deserve the position that I held, no matter how exceptional I was at it. And they pulled that rug from under me and they targeted me. And because of the power and influence they had, they inspired others in the organization to conspire with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you are not dealing with just one person, you are dealing with a group of people who are all working together to kill your career in the workplace, okay? So by the fourth and fifth time of that happening, no wonder I'm suffering trauma. And so, Hush Money, writing this book, gave me a way to express the pain that I was feeling. And it gave my daughters a way to express the pain that they were feeling after after they suffered the same things in their career.
Wow.
And so we took the pain that we were feeling, we drew from that pain as well as the pain from others in our extended family and others in our community to write this book in such a way, Victor, that you could feel it and see it as if it was happening to you or to someone close to you. And so that's where this book began that healing process for us. It gave us a way to release what we were feeling. But let me just be very clear about something, Victor.
Yeah.
This book is not a compilation of multiple people's stories that are all spliced together, to give you this great book. This is one woman's story. Everything that's laid out in my book happened to one woman.
Wow. Wow. You have provided such important context for, as you said, why healing is necessary.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you shared that it's still an ongoing journey.
Yes.
That incidents and continual or compounding trauma and episodes take time to heal from.
Yes.
And that's extremely powerful. As you were sharing just the background of what inspired the book, I was reminded of how the story became so connected to my own story. In that I remember when my sisters and I were in grade school, and my mother was in finishing up her undergrad, going to grad school. And I remember as my dad and my sisters and I would come to pick her up, she would often be extremely irate, full of rage and angry. And I didn't understand why.
Right.
And she worked too in a higher education institution, and it was systematic racism.
Yes.
And so reading the story of Ebony gave me a window into what caused my mom to come to the car, just needing to release the rage that she
Yes.
had to put a good face on, for while
Yes.
she was at work. And it's inspired me even to if it's something that she's open to discussing, to unpacking,
Yes.
understanding a bit more and unpacking her own pain behind the experience that occurred. I know it wasn't for 20, but it definitely was for a few years that the experience occurred. And so, no, it absolutely makes sense.
Yes.
And it's powerful because, as you said, it's healing for you, but there's a spirit of the book that also encourages and facilitates the initial phases, maybe even for others, of healing, just to be able to say, hey,
Right.
I'm not alone.
That's right. If you were to look at some of the reviews, the
Mhm.
reviews are just powerful. And, if you think about where this book was, 11 months ago, okay, 11 months ago, I was selling this book from the trunk of my car because
Mm.
we could not get a publisher interested in our story. Publisher said, no one wants to hear about, racism in the workplace.
Wow.
No one, there's no market for this book.
Wow.
Well, I knew that there were people,
Hmm.
Black people and people of color and white
Mhm.
people, who could benefit. This book has something for everyone, okay? And I knew that. And my daughters knew it. So when publishers would not take us on, we decided to self publish, okay? But again, we're not writers. I mean,
Hmm.
we're not polished writers at all. And so, I laugh every time I think about this book. I'm like, how on earth did we write a book? But we did. But we didn't know what to do with it because we don't have a writing background. We didn't know the first thing about, writing a book and marketing a book. And so we just popped the box of books we had in the trunk of my car, and then we went to parks. We went to pop-up shops in our local community in Colorado Springs. And we just started talking to people of color. That's where we started with,
Mhm. Mhm.
and explaining to them, what made this book unique because, there are a lot of great books out there, Victor. I mean, just wonderful books written by amazing people.
Mhm.
But Hush Money gives you something a little different, and that's why it's resonating with so in her 5-year journey from the time that she is reading the newspaper looking for a job to the
Mhm.
time she gets hired at this for-profit college, and she thinks this is finally her chance to live the American dream because she's struggling. She's having a hard time making ends meet.
Mhm.
She gets this job, and then shortly after that, the racism starts because Ebony can't hide who she is. And
Absolutely.
you follow her through horrific event after horrific event. But what you also get to experience on a very real and genuine level is the racial trauma she
Mhm.
suffers. And that's important, Victor, because when you are a victim of racism in the workplace, one of the first things that happens to you is you are dehumanized, and that organization does not look at you as a victim. They treat you like you are a villain. They treat you like a
Mm.
villain because you are trying to fight back and help yourself. So they don't see you as a victim. They see you as a
Wow.
villain, and you are dehumanized. And so it's important to put the human factor back into the equation because, like I said, the first thing that happens to you is you become dehumanized.
Mhm.
And it's important for people to see that when you are a victim of racism in the workplace, when you clock out at the end of the day, Victor, that racism impact on you doesn't clock out with you, right?
Mhm.
You carry it with you and it becomes part of you. And so you get to see that in vivid detail. But even with all of that in the book, that's not what's got people's attention. What has their attention is the subtitle of my book, How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism and Kept Her Job. Because, Victor, I'm going to tell you, most of the time, if you are someone who is fortunate enough to actually prove what's happening to you, and the organization says, okay, obviously this happened to you, so we're going to settle with you. Okay. As part of this settlement that they give you, they want you to separate from them. They don't want to deal with you anymore. They don't want to see you anymore. They want to pay you to go away.
Sure.
And so, there's bad parts to going away because, yes, you get this settlement and you can live off of it while you're trying to heal from the racial trauma you suffered. But eventually, you have to go back to work. And this company over here that can't stand you because you got a settlement from them and you proved systemic racism, well, you still need them to give you a professional reference. And they're not going to make it easy for you to get gainful employment in your field. So people are interested in how this woman actually kept her job. She went through all of this. And the title tells you, well, there must have been some hush money.
Sure.
So how did she keep her job? And that's what's piqued so many people's interest.
No, yeah, of course I think it's the not only great marketing but extreme storytelling.
Yes.
Extremely phenomenal storytelling, because you say, okay, I know she's going to keep her job.
Mhm.
How though?
How? What is the how?
How does it happen? Yeah.
And we don't mince words with the title. The title tells
Absolutely.
you exactly what you're going to find out.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And what you shared is so pivotal, because from the work that I do in focusing on burnout, one of the very elements that is often not emphasized as a trigger for burnout is what I classify as societal caste. And that is the ranking of human value and worth within society. And this happens among genders. It happens among sexuality, along the lines of sexuality, of nationality, of race, of class. So these various classifications, basically, whether it's articulated or just lived as a reality, are how people are ranked as a human being.
Right.
And this is lived out in a systematic way throughout society, not just at work, but when you're at the grocery store, when you're at the doctor's office, when you appear at, just everywhere, it's a part of the way that life is lived. And so this is not anything that is abnormal to human societies, but as it relates to the American, as it were, experience, one of the most prominent forms of this layer of societal caste is racism. And your book takes this head on. I love what um, Dr. Durrell, in his book Overcoming Our Racism, talks about, and he lays out just the nuance of the whole reality of racism, in that marginalized groups are socialized to see the discrimination, the prejudice, and the mistreatment, so on and so forth. But the dominant group is socialized to be blind to it.
Right.
And
Right.
so when you have that dynamic, those that are marginalized are often constantly trying to prove themselves
Yes.
at the with the purpose of living successful lives, and this constant spinning your wheels in the mud that you're hoping will eventually become solid ground or start moving in where you can get traction doesn't happen very easily. And as it works with tires on the road. If you going too fast and not making enough progress, burnout is something that happens. And so I
Well,
believe
and
that you go ahead. Yeah.
sorry about that. When I think of burnout, I think of Black people and people of color who have been conditioned and trained to believe that if you put in the work, if you work hard, and you match that work with the effort and the knowledge and the skills, you are guaranteed success. And so, oftentimes, what happens is we are taking on so much extra work above and beyond what anyone is expected to do in their jobs, because we believe that if we take on these extra responsibilities, if we take on this extra mountain of work, if we work 60, 70, 80 hours a week compared to everyone else's 40 or 50 hours a week, then that is going to guarantee us success. And oftentimes it doesn't. What it does guarantee is burnout.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so powerful as Isabel Wilkerson in her book Cast talks about this idea that the more ambitious, marginalized, and those of the Black and brown communities are in the economic society,
Mhm,
the more exposed they are to the stressors that are prolonged that we call burnout.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's it's not as if you aren't ambitious, you're still going to experience it. If you
Oh,
are more
absolutely.
ambitious, it's the likelihood of you experiencing more of it magnifies and intensifies. And so
Mhm.
absolutely.
But another thing that contributes to that burnout, it's still in the same vein, but it's a little bit different. So in my career, I told you that I experienced racism in the workplace.
Mhm.
But what I want to talk a little bit about is the type of racism. Because, Victor, um, racism in the workplace today, so modern day racism, is not like it used to be.
Mhm.
You know, where, there was a time where, things were done in the open. It was
Mhm.
overt, it was
Mhm.
easily spotted. You could point at it and say, what I'm experiencing is racism. That's not what happened to me. Okay. The type of racism that I experienced in my career was not overt, it was covert, it was hidden, Victor.
Mhm.
And because it's hidden, it's harder to prove. And because it's hidden and it's not out in the opening, it's more nefarious, more sinister, because it messes with your mind and it causes you to question your reality, and it causes you to question what's happening to you, because you can't easily put it into an EEOC bucket, what's happening to you. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, just in case there's anyone who's listening to your show today that doesn't know what I mean by covert hidden racism, let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
And I'll take this example right out of my book.
Yeah.
So, organizations have gotten really smart over the years.
Mhm.
And those organizations who tolerate racism, they know that if I paid this Black person or this person of color $20,000 less than I paid this white person to do the same job, well, that could easily be proven by payroll records, because payroll records would clearly show this person's making much less, right?
Mhm.
So even though there is still a pay gap, that pay gap is getting less and less, right?
Hmm.
But here's where they get you. Okay. So If you are a college, okay, I'll use a college right out of my
Yeah.
book. You are a college and you have multiple campuses. And in these multiple campuses, you're going to have duplicates of different titles. So you're going to have receptionist at each campus. You're going to have student finance advisors at each campus, and you're going to have a director of student finance, right? So if you pay the directors of student finance, and like I said, you pay the white one $20,000 more than you pay the black one, payroll records could easily show that. So here's where they get you. Same example, you've got two directors of student finance, okay? For the new white director of student finance, you're going to give them a training that is so airtight, okay? Their training is going to set them up for success right out of the gate. You're going to give them all the information that they need that is vital to their success. You're going to provide them with the right resources that they need to do this job successfully. You're going to give them all of the right tools that they need to do this job successfully. And you're going to have mentorship available for them. So they have everything they need right out of the gate to set them up for success. Now, the same trainer that trained the white person now has to train the black person or the person of color. But they withhold information that is vital to that person's success. And in my case, in my career, not only did the trainer withhold information, but they intentionally trained me on the wrong information. Okay. They want to take you in the wrong direction. So they're giving you the wrong information so that you make mistakes. Okay. But it doesn't stop there, Victor. They limit your resources. They limit your tools. There's no mentorship available. There's nobody who looks like you in a leadership position who can mentor you, okay, or identify with you and what you are dealing with. And so, because they're limiting your information or giving you the wrong information, limiting your resources, limiting your tools, and there's no mentorship, as you are doing this job, you are making mistakes that you were conditioned and trained to make. And they know you're going to make these mistakes because they've trained you to make them, but they are documenting all of the mistakes you're making, Victor. And they're using this documentation to justify firing you or letting you go. Now, on the surface, okay, the organization is saying, Victor, we love Black people. We gave you this job, okay? We gave you this job. We paid you a comparable salary. It is not our fault that you're not the right fit. You couldn't perform. You're not the right fit for this job. And so many of our people, Victor, lose their jobs and are completely dumbfounded as to how that happened.
Yeah.
And you can't prove it. It is almost impossible to prove unless you've read my book.
Yeah.
Right here. Unless you've read my book and you've adopted the amazing covert strategies that Ebony used against her employer after she made a million mistakes and after she suffered trauma. She figured out a strategy and came up with ways, as you know, that most people would never consider in a million years to actually fight back, survive that battle, bring that organization to their knees, and keep her job.
I want to start off by encouraging you to get the book series Hush Money. In it, Jacquie shares and details that subversive strategy that cornered the organization that Ebony dealt with. In part one of our conversation, Jacquie reminded us that all burnout isn't a self-inflicted wound because organizations are responsible for the existing cultural climate. organizations must operate with integrity and exercise their agency to ensure that equity, inclusion, and belonging are provided as much as possible for all employees. As a person of color, a Black woman particularly, Jacquie shared such a relatable story that may have triggered the memory of a similar experience for you or for someone that you know. The hard reality of workplace racism brings James Baldwin's words into increasing clarity when he said, "Not everything faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Thank you for joining this episode of Burnout and Beyond. To see previous episodes, visit the podcast page on victorspeakslife.org. If you or your organization want to grow beyond burnout, share your information by clicking the Book Victor icon. And until next time, live well.